They laughed because they saw a maid, but before the night was over, they would realize they had been standing in the presence of a legend. Crystal chandeliers glowed above the grand ballroom of the Park Estate, turning every champagne glass into a small piece of light. Politicians, business owners, and celebrities filled the room, all gathered to celebrate the engagement of Adrian Park and Olivia Kensington. Soft piano music drifted through the air, while servers moved quietly between guests. Among them was Naomi Carter. She wore a simple Black Maid uniform, her dark skin glowing under the warm lights, her hair tied neatly back. She carried a silver tray with sparkling water and moved with such calm precision that most people hardly noticed her. Most people. Olivia noticed everything. Standing near the center of the ballroom in an elegant white dress, she smiled as another round of applause followed her speech about generosity and charity. Then her eyes landed on Naomi. A slow smile appeared on her face. "I have one more surprise tonight," she announced, raising her champagne glass. The room immediately quieted. "Someone here is going to leave with $20,000. Excited murmurs spread through the guests. $20,000 was not much to these people, but everyone loved a game. Olivia's smile widened. "I need a volunteer." Her gaze settled on Naomi. "You." Naomi stopped walking. Several guests turned around to see whom Olivia had chosen. "Me, ma'am?" she asked softly. "Yes, you. Come here." The room watched as Naomi slowly approached the center of the ballroom, still carrying her tray. A few guests exchanged amused smiles. Adrian stood near the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, his black suit perfectly tailored. The tattoo at his neck disappeared beneath his collar as he quietly observed the scene. "Tonight's challenge is simple," Olivia said brightly. "A strength competition. Whoever wins receives $20,000 to donate wherever they wish." More applause followed. Then she looked directly at Naomi. "I think our maid should participate." Laughter erupted immediately. Someone nearly spilled his drink. Another guest smiled with pity. Naomi remained perfectly still. "I appreciate the offer, ma'am," she said politely, "but I would rather continue working." More laughter. Olivia tilted her head. "You do not want $20,000. I do not need to be on stage. Or perhaps you are afraid." The room grew quieter. Naomi lowered her eyes. "I simply do not wish to participate." Olivia laughed softly. "That is disappointing. I thought everyone enjoyed a challenge." A few people nodded in agreement. Others raised their phones, already expecting entertainment. Adrian's eyes remained fixed on Naomi. There was no embarrassment on her face. No anger, only calm. The kind of calm that did not belong in a room full of mockery. Then Naomi looked up for just a second, and the light caught the faint scar across her knuckles. Adrian noticed it immediately, and for reasons he could not explain, he suddenly felt that the quiet maid standing beneath the chandeliers was hiding a story far bigger than anyone in the room could imagine. The laughter lingered in the ballroom long after Naomi stepped back from the center of the room. To the guests, she had just refused $20,000. To Olivia, she had refused something far more important. "Attention. Come on," Olivia said with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. "It is only a little fun." Several guests nodded in agreement. One man lifted his glass and laughed. "I would compete for $20,000. More chuckles followed. Naomi held the silver tray carefully against her side. "I'm sorry, Mom. I still have work to do." She turned slightly, intending to leave, but Olivia stepped in front of her. "You are very serious for someone working at a party." The room laughed again. Adrian remained silent near the fireplace, but his eyes never left Naomi. He had met people from every corner of the world. He knew embarrassment when he saw it. He knew fear. Yet the woman in the maid's uniform showed neither. She looked calm, almost disciplined. "Please excuse me," Naomi said gently. Olivia folded her arms. "Tell me something. If someone handed you $20,000 right now, what would you even do with it?" A few guests smiled, waiting for an answer. Naomi hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tray. Then she said quietly, "I would pay for my mother's treatment." The laughter stopped. Not completely, but enough for the room to notice. Olivia blinked once, then forced another smile. Oh, I did not know that. Naomi simply nodded. She has been ill for a long time. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then someone near the bar cleared his throat and changed the subject. The brief silence disappeared. Olivia seemed almost disappointed that sympathy had entered the room. Well, she said, clapping her hands softly, that is even more reason to participate. $20,000 could help a lot. Naomi lowered her eyes. I appreciate the offer, but I do not need to stand on a stage to help my mother. The answer made Adrian look up. There was something unusual about the way she spoke. No bitterness, no self-pity, just quiet certainty, the kind that came from carrying heavy burdens for a long time. Suddenly, a server approached Naomi. The kitchen needs more sparkling water. Of course, she replied. She gave a small nod to Olivia and started walking away. As she passed Adrian, he noticed something else. The faint white lines on her knuckles. The small scar near her wrist. They were old scars, not the kind that came from cleaning dishes or carrying trays. Naomi disappeared through the kitchen doors. Adrian continued staring at the empty doorway. You look concerned, Olivia said as she walked beside him. I'm thinking. About the maid? She asked with a laugh. That would be surprising. Adrian did not smile. She said she needed money for her mother. Lots of people need money. Most people would have accepted $20,000. Olivia shrugged. Maybe she is too proud. Adrian looked back toward the kitchen. Somehow, pride did not seem like the right word. Far beyond the music and the laughter, he had seen something in Naomi's eyes when she mentioned her mother. It looked less like pride and more like sacrifice. And for the first time that evening, the mysterious woman in the maid's uniform had his full attention. Some people become interesting the moment they refuse to impress others. Adrian could not explain why, but the quiet maid walking through his house suddenly seemed more mysterious than anyone attending his engagement party. The music resumed in the ballroom, and the conversations slowly returned, yet his eyes remained fixed on the kitchen doors through which Naomi had disappeared. You are staring, Olivia said with a laugh. I did not know you cared so much about the help. Adrian took a sip of water and said nothing. She is strange. I will give you that, Olivia continued. Most people would have jumped at $20,000. Maybe she has a reason, Adrian replied calmly. Olivia smiled. Or maybe she enjoys pretending she is above everyone. Before he could answer, the front doors of the estate opened again. Several guests turned around. A tall man entered the ballroom, wearing a dark blue suit and carrying himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to attention. Murmurs spread immediately through the room. That is Ryan Mercer, the former MMA champion. I've seen him on television. Olivia's face lit up. Ryan. She walked across the room and greeted him warmly. Ryan laughed and shook her hand. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. You arrived at the perfect time, Olivia said. We were just having a little competition. Ryan looked around the ballroom. A competition? For charity. She smiled mischievously, and our maid refused to participate. Several guests laughed again. Ryan smiled politely, though he seemed confused. That hardly sounds like a tragedy. You have not met her yet. Olivia lowered her voice as though sharing a secret. She is impossible to read. At that moment, the kitchen doors opened again. Naomi stepped back into the ballroom, carrying another silver tray. Ryan's eyes moved toward her casually. Then he stopped. Something changed in his expression. He frowned slightly. Who is that? Olivia laughed. Our mysterious maid. Naomi walked between the guests, carefully replacing empty glasses. Ryan continued watching her. There was nothing dramatic about the scene. Just a woman in a black uniform doing her job. Yet he could not look away. When Naomi turned, slightly, the light from the chandeliers touched the side of her face. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Have we met before? Olivia followed his gaze. I doubt it. She started working here recently. But Ryan was no longer listening. Naomi reached for an empty glass, and the sleeve of her uniform moved just enough to reveal a faded scar near her wrist. Ryan's expression changed again. Then he noticed her hands, then the way she stood, balanced and relaxed, even while carrying a tray. A strange silence settled over him. What is it? Olivia asked. He did not answer immediately. Nothing, he said at last, though he clearly did not believe his own words. Across the room, Naomi looked up for a brief moment. Her eyes met Ryan's. She offered a polite nod and continued walking. Ryan remained frozen. A memory stirred somewhere deep in his mind. Bright lights, a crowded arena, a woman standing in the center of a cage with thousands of people chanting her name. He could not place it. Not yet. But suddenly, the evening had become far more interesting than an engagement party. Some secrets stay hidden because people never bother to look closely. Ryan Mercer could not explain why his heart had suddenly started beating faster, but every instinct told him he had seen the woman before. Naomi moved through the ballroom with the same calm expression, replacing empty glasses and collecting used napkins as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet Ryan kept watching her. "You look like you have seen a ghost," Olivia said with a laugh. "Maybe I have." She smiled. "Trust me, there is nothing mysterious about her. She cleans rooms and carries trays." Ryan did not answer. Something about that description felt completely wrong. Naomi walked toward the dessert table and carefully placed fresh plates beside a three-tiered cake. A guest accidentally bumped into her shoulder. "Sorry," the man said. "It is all right," Naomi replied softly. The tray never moved in her hands, not even an inch. Ryan noticed. So did Adrian. Most people would have spilled something or stepped back in surprise. Naomi simply adjusted her balance without effort and continued working. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "That is strange." "What is strange?" Olivia asked. "Nothing." But he kept staring. Then Naomi reached for another glass, and the sleeve of her uniform slipped back again. This time the light revealed several small scars across her forearm. Olivia noticed them too. "Goodness," she said. "What happened to you?" Naomi looked down and calmly pulled her sleeve back into place. "They're old scars." "From what?" Olivia asked with curiosity that sounded more like amusement. Naomi remained quiet. One of the guests laughed. Maybe she had an exciting life before becoming a maid. Several people smiled. Naomi gave a polite nod and turned away. "Wait," Olivia said, stepping in front of her. "Now I am curious." Naomi stopped. "There is nothing interesting to tell. Everyone has a story." The room had become strangely attentive again. A few guests moved closer. Others lowered their glasses and listened. Naomi looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. "I really should get back to work." Olivia smiled. "You know what I think? I think our mysterious maid is hiding something." Laughter spread through the crowd again. Adrian's expression darkened slightly. He did not enjoy the direction this was taking. Ryan, however, had not taken his eyes off Naomi. Suddenly, another memory flashed through his mind. A crowded arena, bright cameras, a woman standing under white lights, her hands wrapped, her face calm and focused. He could almost hear thousands of people chanting. Then the memory disappeared again. "Excuse me," Naomi said softly. "I need to return to the kitchen." Olivia folded her arms. "You always leave when people ask questions." Naomi looked at her quietly. "Some things belong in the past." The answer made Ryan's eyes widen slightly. He had heard athletes say those exact words after retirement interviews. Before he could think further, Olivia laughed again. "I cannot believe you're making our maid sound mysterious." Then she smiled at Naomi. "Very well. But before you go, answer one question." Naomi waited. Olivia's smile became sharper. "Who taught you to hide from every challenge?" The ballroom fell silent. For the first time that evening, Naomi did not immediately answer. Instead, she looked down at the floor and softly said, "My mother taught me something much more important than winning." The room became quieter than before. Even the music seemed distant. Naomi's eyes remained lowered after mentioning her mother, and for a brief moment, something painful passed across her face. It disappeared almost immediately, but Ryan saw it. So did Adrian. Olivia, however, seemed more interested than sympathetic. "And what exactly did your mother teach you?" she asked. Naomi took a slow breath. "She taught me that peace is more valuable than proving yourself to strangers." No one laughed this time. The answer was too calm, too sincere. Then Olivia smiled again, trying to recover the playful mood of the evening. "That is a lovely lesson," but it sounds suspiciously like an excuse. A few uneasy chuckles floated through the ballroom. Naomi said nothing. She simply held the tray against her side and waited. Ryan continued studying her face. The more she spoke, the more familiar she became. Then another memory surfaced. An interview. Cameras flashing. A woman saying she wanted a quiet life after years of competition. His heartbeat quickened. "What is wrong with you?" Olivia asked him softly. Ryan blinked. "Nothing." "You keep staring at her." He looked back at Naomi. "I'm trying to remember something." Naomi gently shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The movement was natural and effortless, yet it struck Ryan like lightning. He had seen that stance before. He had seen it inside training gyms and on television screens. His expression slowly changed. Adrian noticed immediately. "Do you know her?" he asked. Ryan did not answer right away. "I'm not sure." Then he looked directly at Naomi. "Have you ever been to Las Vegas?" The question seemed to stop the entire room. Naomi looked up. For the first time all evening, surprise touched her face. It lasted only a second. "A long time ago," she answered quietly. Ryan's eyes widened. "I knew it." Olivia looked from one to the other, confused. What does Las Vegas have to do with anything? Ryan barely heard her. He took a few slow steps toward Naomi. "I have seen you before." Naomi remained calm. "I do not think so." "No," Ryan said softly. "I remember now." He looked at her hands, then the scar on her wrist, then her eyes. "This cannot be." Several guests exchanged curious glances. Olivia laughed nervously. "You are acting as if she is a celebrity." Ryan did not smile. "Maybe she is." Silence followed. Naomi's expression remained unreadable. "Sir," she said gently, "I think you are mistaken." But Ryan shook his head. "I do not think I am." He looked around the ballroom, as though trying to find words that refused to come. Then he looked back at Naomi. There was someone years ago. The room listened carefully. A fighter who suddenly disappeared when she was at the top of the sport. Naomi lowered her eyes again. "That has nothing to do with me." Ryan's voice grew quieter. "Maybe." Then he stared at her for another long moment. "Or maybe I've been standing 10 feet away from someone I never expected to see again." A strange silence filled the room. Even Olivia no longer looked amused. Adrian's attention sharpened. The mysterious scars. The calm. The discipline. Suddenly, none of it seemed accidental anymore. Then Ryan spoke 4 words that made the air in the ballroom feel heavier. "What is your full name?" The question seemed simple, yet it changed the atmosphere of the entire ballroom. Naomi stood perfectly still, her hands resting on the silver tray. Around her, conversations had completely stopped. Even the musicians looked toward her with curiosity. Ryan waited, his eyes fixed on her face. Adrian did the same. Olivia folded her arms, clearly irritated that the attention of her party had shifted away from her. After several seconds, Naomi answered softly. "Naomi Carter." Ryan blinked once, then twice. The color slowly drained from his face. "No," he whispered. "It really is you." A few guests looked at one another in confusion. Olivia laughed nervously. "Should I know that name?" Ryan barely heard her. He looked at Naomi as if he had just seen someone return from another world. "You disappeared," he said quietly. Naomi lowered her eyes. "I retired. People looked for you for years." She offered a small smile. "I was not trying to be found." The room became completely silent. One of the guests finally stepped closer. "Who is she?" Ryan slowly turned toward him. Years ago, Naomi Carter was one of the most respected fighters in the country. Nobody moved. She was called the Reaper. The words seemed to hang in the air. A woman near the piano frowned. "Wait, I know that name." She pulled out her phone. Another guest did the same. Then another. Fingers moved quickly across screens. The ballroom filled with the soft sounds of phones unlocking and internet searches. Naomi stood quietly in the center of it all. She did not look nervous. She did not look proud. She looked tired. Then a man near the bar suddenly inhaled sharply. "Oh my God." He turned his phone around. A photograph filled the screen. Under bright arena lights stood Naomi, younger but unmistakable, holding a championship belt above her head while thousands of people cheered behind her. The room froze. Another guest found a different article. Then another picture appeared. Headlines, interviews, magazine covers. The same woman who had been carrying trays all evening looked out from every screen. "That is impossible," someone whispered. Olivia took a phone from a nearby guest and stared at the image. Her smile vanished. "This cannot be her." Ryan looked back at Naomi. "I watched your championship fight in Las Vegas. I remember the way you stood before the match even started." Naomi remained silent. "You were one of the biggest names in the sport." A long pause followed. Then Adrian finally spoke. "Why did you never tell anyone?" Naomi looked at him with calm eyes. "Because it does not matter anymore." The answer stunned the room more than the photographs had. Fame mattered to almost everyone standing there. Yet the woman who had once possessed it spoke about it, as though it belonged to someone else entirely. Olivia lowered the phone slowly. For the first time all evening, uncertainty appeared on her face. The maid she had mocked no longer looked ordinary. She looked untouchable. Then Ryan asked the question everyone was thinking. "Why would someone like you work as a maid?" Naomi looked down at the tray in her hands and answered in a voice so soft that the entire room leaned forward to hear it. "Because life changes faster than people do. Silence has a strange sound when an entire room realizes it has been wrong." The crystal chandeliers still glowed above the ballroom, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The laughter was gone. In its place stood disbelief. Guests continued staring at their phones, scrolling through old photographs and articles as if they expected the images to disappear. They did not. Every search led back to the same woman standing quietly in a Black Maid's uniform. Naomi Carter, former champion, national icon, a woman who had once filled arenas with cheering fans. "I cannot believe this," a guest whispered. Another shook his head. "I remember her retirement. It was all over the news." A woman near the piano looked up from her phone. "She retired when she was still winning. Nobody understood why." Ryan slowly nodded. "That is true. People thought she would come back." Naomi lowered her eyes. "I never planned to." Adrian could not stop looking at her. The woman who had spent the evening carrying trays and avoiding attention had once been admired by millions. Yet there was not a trace of pride in her expression. She seemed almost uncomfortable being recognized. Olivia finally found her voice. "This is insane." She looked from one guest to another. "You are all acting like she is royalty." Nobody answered. The room had stopped listening to her. One by one, people looked at Naomi differently. The maid had vanished. In her place stood someone they suddenly respected. The change was almost painful to watch. A man who had laughed earlier stepped forward awkwardly. "Miss Carter, I am sorry if I said anything offensive." Another guest nodded. "Me too." A third person quietly lowered his eyes in embarrassment. Naomi offered each of them a small, polite smile. "You do not need to apologize." Her answer only made them feel worse. Ryan looked at her with admiration. "You really walked away from all of it." "Yes. The money, the fame, everything." She nodded once. "Sometimes other things become more important." The words lingered in the room. Adrian stepped closer. "What could possibly be more important than a life like that?" Naomi looked at him for several seconds. There was no sadness in her eyes, only a quiet tenderness. "Family." The answer was simple, but it carried more weight than any speech that had been given that evening. Olivia looked confused. "You gave up a career people dream about for your family?" Naomi looked at her kindly. "Not everyone dreams about the same things." The room fell silent again. One of the older guests slowly removed his glasses. "I think we judged you far too quickly tonight." Naomi's expression softened. "It happens." "Does it bother you?" he asked. She thought for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "Only when people forget that every person has a story." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the musicians stood quietly in the corner. The sentence seemed to settle over the ballroom like falling snow. Adrian looked around the room and realized something uncomfortable. If Ryan had never recognized Naomi, they would have continued treating her as though she did not matter. The thought stayed with him. Then he looked back at her, and for the first time that evening, he felt something he had not expected to feel at his own engagement party. Respect. Respect has a way of exposing the truth about everyone in the room. Adrian stood in silence for several moments, looking at Naomi as though he were seeing her for the first time. Then he slowly turned toward the guests gathered around them. "Something about tonight bothers me," he said calmly. Everyone moved to him. "A few minutes ago, many of you laughed at this woman. Nobody spoke. Now you are apologizing because you discovered she used to be famous." The room became uncomfortable. Several guests lowered their eyes. Adrian looked back at Naomi. But she was the same person then as she is now. Silence. She deserved respect before any of us knew her name. The words settled heavily over the ballroom. Ryan nodded quietly. "He is right." A man near the piano sighed and slipped his phone into his pocket. "I suppose we all judged too quickly." Olivia looked around in disbelief. "This is unbelievable." She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "You are all acting as though we committed some terrible crime." Nobody answered. Then she looked directly at Naomi. "I asked you to join a game. That is all." Naomi's expression remained gentle. "I know. Then why is everyone acting as if I did something horrible?" Before Naomi could answer, Adrian spoke. "Because you only treated her kindly after learning who she was." Olivia turned toward him. "And you are different." The question hung in the air. Adrian thought about it for a moment. Then he surprised everyone. "No," he said quietly. "I do not think I am." The room grew still again. "I should have stopped this much earlier." He looked at Naomi. "I saw that you were uncomfortable, and I said nothing." Naomi shook her head. "You do not owe me anything." "Actually, I do." His voice remained calm. "Because this happened in my home." Olivia stared at him. "You are apologizing to the maid?" Adrian looked at her. "I am apologizing to a person." Those words seemed to strike her harder than anything else that evening. She opened her mouth but could not answer. Ryan folded his arms and quietly stepped aside. The guests watched in complete silence. Then Adrian looked back at Naomi. "I think you have shown more grace tonight than most of us." Naomi smiled softly. "I'm only trying to get through the evening." A few people laughed gently, relieved by her kindness. Then Adrian asked, "Will you accept my apology?" Naomi looked at him for several seconds. Finally, she nodded. "Of course." A long breath seemed to leave the room. Olivia, however, remained frozen. She looked at Naomi, then at the guests, then back at Adrian. For the first time that evening, she realized something painful. The attention she had wanted so badly no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the quiet woman in the maid's uniform, and standing beneath the crystal chandeliers, with a silver tray still in her hands, Naomi Carter somehow looked like the most important person in the room. The music never started again. Nobody asked for another drink. The engagement party that had begun with laughter now stood wrapped in a quiet that seemed almost sacred. Naomi still held the silver tray in her hands, though she had forgotten she was supposed to be working. The crystal chandeliers reflected in her dark eyes, while the guests continued watching her with a kind of respect that had not existed an hour earlier. Adrian stepped closer. "There is one thing I still do not understand," he said gently. Naomi looked at him. "Why leave all of it behind?" He glanced at the photographs glowing on the phones around the room. "You had a career people spend their entire lives chasing." Naomi looked down at the tray and smiled softly. It was a tired smile, but also a peaceful one. Slowly, she reached in her pocket and pulled out her phone. She touched the screen and turned it toward him. A photograph appeared. An elderly woman sat beside a window, smiling at the camera. Adrian looked at the picture. "Your mother?" Naomi nodded. "She has Alzheimer's disease." The room became completely still. "A few years ago, she stopped remembering my matches. Then she stopped remembering my interviews. One day, she looked at me and asked if I still worked at the little restaurant where I had my first job." Naomi's smile trembled slightly. "She forgot every championship I ever won." Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. But she remembered that I used to bring her flowers after work. A woman near the piano quietly wiped her eyes. Naomi looked at the photograph again. "I realized something that day. None of my trophies mattered to her. The only thing she remembered was kindness." She slipped her phone back into her pocket. "So I retired." Ryan lowered his head. The older guests looked away in silence. "I sold my house," Naomi continued softly. "I moved closer to her care center and started taking whatever work I could find." Adrian stared at her. And you do not regret it? She looked up at him, and for the first time all evening her smile looked completely genuine. Every evening when I visit her, she smiles when she sees me. Some days she remembers my name. Some days she does not. But she is happy. Tears filled the eyes of several guests. That is enough for me. Silence settled over the ballroom again. Then Naomi gently lifted the tray. I should probably get back to work. A few people laughed softly through their tears. Even Adrian smiled. No, he said quietly. I think your shift is over. She looked at him in surprise. Sir. He shook his head. Tonight, you reminded everyone in this room of something we had forgotten. Naomi waited. Adrian glanced around the ballroom. Titles disappear. Money disappears. Fame disappears. But the way we treat people stays with us. No one argued. No one could. Naomi looked at him for a long moment, and then gave a small nod. The chandeliers continued to glow above them, and untouched glasses of champagne sat forgotten on silver trays. The engagement party had become something entirely different. It had become a lesson. And as Naomi Carter stood quietly in her simple black uniform, carrying nothing more than a tray and a photograph of her mother, every person in that room understood that true greatness does not need applause. And that night, power itself bowed before dignity.